is Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani. Austin Cisler here producing, and he will be adding his own flavor to this here real soon. We got a ton to discuss. What a wild week in Detroit sports. I would say pretty much none of it positive. So if you're coming on this show today looking for jolly good news, you're not going to get it. And I was talking with Austin off the air. Really, any one of these, whether it's the Michigan basketball news, the Pistons draft, what's been going on with the Tigers, or the Terrion Arnold news, could lead off the show. We're just going to lead off with the news that broke just before last week's show uploaded, which is just coincidence, timing it happens. Dusty May has hit the road. Dusty May, the national championship winning coach for the University of Michigan, on Monday morning, accepted a job with the Dallas Mavericks. He is now their head coach. He will go to Dallas, where he will be the head coach of Cooper Flagg, as well as his former player, Merez Johnson. Pretty shocking news when it came out. Pretty shocking news considering the way that Dusty had been talking about this program immediately after they won the national championship. He's on the phone trying to add transfers. It seemed as though the roster was pretty locked in and set, and we will discuss that. But there's a lot to unpack here. Look, whenever you are a fan of a team that loses a coach, especially a coach that it was as successful as Dusty was, your initial reaction is, what did we do wrong? And there are things that Michigan did wrong, and I look forward to pointing all those out. I do have to say, I think Dusty has always been very calculated with the moves that he makes. He's ultra competitive, and I think he's ultra calculated. And unlike John Beilein, who I felt like made an impulsive decision to scratch an itch in 2019 when he went to a Cleveland team that was no good, that was coming out of the second LeBron era and really had no nucleus in place, Dusty saw an opportunity here that I believe was too good to pass up. Because generally speaking, if you're a first-year coach for an NBA team, you're not often going into a great situation. And while I wouldn't say Dallas is a great situation, it is one of the more appealing situations in the NBA because you are going to coach Cooper Flagg, who had a transcendent rookie year a year ago and is on pace to become one of the faces of this league. You couple him with Kyrie Irving. You add Merez Johnson in the draft. Dallas is also, as an organization, has more often than not in the 2000s, or at least since in the 21st century, been wildly successful. Playoffs, made the finals several times. The Luka years, the Dirk years, obviously, all culminating in that championship in 2011. Widely known for treating their players and their coaches about as well as any organization in the NBA. There's a lot that was appealing about this gig. So I think it does say a lot about what Dallas is as opposed to what Michigan isn't. And I do have to point this out. I think that in a lot of ways, much like it did 2 years ago when they hired Dusty, I think the stars kind of aligned and he felt like, there might not be another opportunity like this. And also, look, he's just coming off of a 37-3 season. Who knows if his stock is going to be higher? Really, I mean, they just had one of the best teams of the 21st century. It's hard to top that. Now, as far as Michigan is concerned, and what does this mean? Look, it is very easy to put a lot of blame on Ward Manuel, and you should. And I'm going to continue to do that because this is a pattern of behavior now. This is something I understand all these circumstances were a little bit different, especially with Jim Harbaugh and the punishment that was coming, but this program and this university has lost too many good coaches over the last decade, and it's all happened under the same athletic director. And it speaks to something that has always bothered me about Michigan basketball in comparison to Michigan football. In fact, I'll go as far as to say Dusty May's departure is further proof why Michigan is and will always be a football school, no matter the success that they have in this sport. Because let's say Michigan hired a 40-something football coach, and in year 2, he won them a national championship, and he was getting calls from the NFL. Michigan would lock him in a room and make sure that he ain't leaving. Okay, they would make sure that contract is signed. It doesn't matter if they demanded snow cone machines in the locker room. They are doing it. And I think when you look at where Dusty was at, when you go back and watch all these interviews, whether it's Rich Eisen or any of the shows that he was on after the national championship, he always spoke enthusiastically about Michigan, and I don't think he was lying. But the one thing he would always say is if it felt like we couldn't get it done again year in and year out, meaning winning the national championship every year, then I could see myself leaving. And I think that given the state of college sports and also Michigan's kind of historical stubbornness with some of this stuff, especially when it comes to basketball, I think he felt like he was starting to deal with some unserious people. And I don't know if there's a more unserious athletic director in the Big Ten, maybe in the country right now, than Ward Manuel. I've seen a lot of people point to the fact that Dusty seemed relatively unhappy or uncertain about the current state of college basketball. And people have countered that by saying, well, the current state of college basketball, that's why you won. That's not untrue. But just because you adapt to something and are successful at something doesn't mean that you like it. Dusty was even open about the fact after the national championship. He said, look, we had so many transfers on our roster. In an ideal world, we would have had a little bit more retention, but it's year two, and so I had to go out and get the players that I felt like were best to help us win a national championship. He assembled a masterpiece of a roster, a masterpiece of a team, and they won the whole thing. That's a hard thing to repeat, and it's evolving. What NIL is right now and what the portal is right now is probably drastically different than what it might be in 2 years or 3 years. Maybe at some point there's some sort of, restrictions on this stuff. I don't know. I mean, it looks like they're adding that 5th-year eligibility rule. A lot is changing, and I think that he didn't see a need or a want to commit to something long-term that was ever changing. So I do understand that. I still believe, I think, Michigan could have absolutely retained him. I think they dropped the ball on this. I think that this is where Michigan has always been and how they've always viewed their basketball program. What Michigan people want Michigan basketball to be is fine. Be good. Don't be embarrassing. Don't rock the boat. They do not want a repeat of the Fab Five sanctions. They sure as hell don't want a repeat of the Juwan era where you had, fights and handshake lines and stuff like that. They want Michigan basketball to be fine. Be good. Make the tournament. Maybe you miss the tournament every few years or something. Okay, whatever. Abide by the rules. Don't get in trouble. Don't rock the boat. That's not what they had with Dusty. With Dusty, they had a disruptor. They had a guy who really didn't care about whether or not the rest of the Big Ten liked him. They didn't have a guy who really cared that much about earning respect. They had a guy who cared about winning. That's how he earned respect. And he came in here and was a lightning rod for 2 years. Took the program to heights that they've never gone to. They've never had a team as good as they had in 2026. And regardless of what Michigan's situation is going to be in the future, I hope Michigan at least looks at this most recent run and says, this is absolutely what we can be. We are not a placeholder until football season starts. We are not a fine, middle-of-the-road Big Ten program that's going to make the tournament every year, and that's about it. This can be the big dog in town. This can be the best team in the Big Ten. This can be the best team in the country. Now, as far as the future is concerned and who they're going to bring in, right now it's Mike Boynton's job as the interim head coach. I think that makes sense. It's the best out of an awkward situation. And once again, despite the fact that he just left, Dusty did not leave the cupboard bare. This is still a really good roster in 2027. If you believe that Michigan basketball is going to experience a severe fall off, that's fine. I don't believe they're going to experience it next year. You already have Elliot Cadeau and Trey McKinney, your backcourt. I mean, 2 All-American caliber talents who are going to be returning for you next year. We'll see what the rest of the roster looks like, but your 2 key scorers and key pieces are going to be coming back. But it's an awkward position because you do have a good roster. And if Boynton comes in here and Michigan makes the Sweet 16 or goes to an Elite 8 or makes a deep run, I would imagine Michigan will say, oh, we got to retain him. I don't know how crazy I am about that. You've seen Josh Sturtz from St. Louis, his name being thrown around. I'm not really focused on that right now because I don't think Michigan is going to be making those decisions for another year. Michigan's decision on this and where they're going to go, that picture is going to become a lot more clear as we watch next year's team play out. Because I think regardless of the talent they have, their ceiling has lowered. Now, I really do think with Dusty coming back next year, their main goal was get back to Detroit, win, get to the Final Four, win a national championship. I don't know if you can do that without him. I think Dusty, because of the talent that he had, was very underappreciated in terms of in-game strategy and the freedom that he allowed his players to play with. There's a chance, and we'll see what happens in Dallas. There's a chance we look back at this and are genuinely shocked that Michigan ever had Dusty May. This guy might just be one of those, generational basketball minds. And in the same way that Steve Kerr slid into Golden State and turned them into a juggernaut right when they were kind of on the up and up, I could see something similar happening in Dallas. Now, they're not going to have the dynasty that Golden State had, but this guy, it seems the further removed we get from this, he was never destined to stick around too long. It doesn't undo anything. He did an unbelievable job. He's one of the best coaches, maybe the best coach they've ever had. He constructed the greatest roster in Michigan basketball history. And as excited as I am to see what the future has in store, it's wildly disappointing because part of it is that we have another guy in the state who's been here for 3 decades. But it felt like that championship in 26, while maybe not the beginning of multiple titles, was the beginning of a lot of years of us expecting second and third weekend appearances in the NCAA tournament. And now, quite frankly, we'll just never know. And that is monumentally disappointing. But I do wish him the best. The guy did an unbelievable job. And I understand people's frustration in the moment, but I'm telling you, at some point in the future, whether it's 10 years down the road, 20 years, they're going to do that reunion at Chrysler Center. And Dusty May is going to get a huge ovation. All right, we're going to be back in segment number 2. The Pistons had a draft this week, and they made some moves. Kind of rocked the boat to a certain extent. I'll explain why I'm kind of hesitant to say that when we return. This is Big Play Detroit. All right, segment number 2. And it just goes to show what kind of crazy news broke this week that we're not leading off with this, because the Pistons had a pretty significant week. Obviously, the draft took place this week. I should have mentioned it in segment number 1, but Michigan had picks 9, 11, and 12. I think all 3 of them going to pretty good situations. Adai Mara going to Oklahoma City is just like a dream for him and really for that organization. I think that's incredible. But let's talk about the Pistons. All right, 3 big moves were made. Move number 1, they actually drafted up. Moved up from the 21st pick to the 17th pick to take Ebuka Okorie from the University of Stanford. I will say what a lot of other people said when they saw this pick. I hadn't heard of this guy. Stanford hasn't been relevant in basketball since like 2004 when they almost had that undefeated regular season. They have not been much of a power. I've done something of a deep dive research into this guy. My assessment is that you can't have much of an assessment right now. I don't know what this guy is going to be. I like the fact that he can create. I think that that's a major plus. I think that the Pistons are adding a guy who, if he reaches his ceiling, can create off the dribble. He played on a bad team last year, which meant there was a lot of volume points, averaged over 20 points a game, lots of shots, right? But that's I'm not even holding that against him. I think sometimes we overdo it. Like, if you're the only good guy in your team, like, let the ball fly. I don't care. Is he going to slide in right away and play a ton? No. And that's why of the 3 moves the Pistons made this week, it's the one I want to focus on the least, just because Detroit, to their credit, has entered win now mode with the season they had last year and really the season they had the year before. This is no longer let's develop and see what the young guys have. It's let's build a roster around Cade Cunningham that can bring us a championship. Could Okorie be the guy that at some point contributes to a championship or a championship caliber team? Absolutely. I don't think it's going to be this year. When you reach a point where you're full head of steam, where it's let's see what we can do to win a championship, draft picks become less and less impactful. That doesn't mean you shouldn't draft well. That doesn't mean you shouldn't develop. That's one thing that ultimately kind of derailed Dumars in the latter half, is that really starting with Darko, quite frankly, they didn't draft particularly well. And after that 08 season, once they made the Billups trade, they didn't have a whole lot left in the cupboard. So we'll see. I think the caliber of player is correct. I just don't know if he's going to contribute a ton in his first season or even first couple seasons. Move number 2, because what we've been waiting for is who's going to be the second scorer that they're officially going to add to complement Cade. We still do not have that answer, but the puzzle's starting to come together. The pieces are starting to come together. The next move the Pistons made, they traded Isaiah Stewart to the Memphis Grizzlies for 3 future second-round picks. This frees up a lot of salary. You no longer have to deal with Stewart's contract. This is where it gets tough to dissect this stuff, because this is still an incomplete offseason. If these 3 moves that I'm talking about right now are all the Pistons do this offseason, it's a bad offseason. I'm sorry. Like, you did not do the one thing that you needed to do. A lot of people are upset with the fact that they traded Stewart. I understand it. Quintessential Detroit guy, culture piece, really good defender. I get all of that. The culture will survive without Isaiah Stewart. And we'll see what other moves they make. But on paper, I can't be too upset about this. The guy's a fine player. He was here during an era where they kind of, they revived the Pistons. I give him a ton of credit for that. And he's going to go on to have a long, NBA career. But I think this opens the door for the Pistons to make another move and hopefully add another scorer, because we've seen some other teams do it. I mean, the blockbuster news this week, the Heat go out and they trade for Giannis. I mean, that's a massive, massive move for the Miami Heat as they throw their hat in contention for potentially being a legit contender in the Eastern Conference. The Pistons haven't made that move yet. The third move that they made, acquired Isaiah Joe from Oklahoma City. Detroit, after getting 3 future second-round picks in the Stewart deal, trade 2 future second-round picks to the Thunder for Isaiah Joe. You get shooting. You get a guy who shot over 40% from three-point range a year ago, about 11 points a game. Good move. It's another one of those moves that I look at and I say, okay, there's nothing on paper that I dislike about this. There's going to be some pieces that you're probably going to lose. Seems like Duncan Robinson probably won't be returning. We'll see. Same with guys like Tobias Harris. Like, I have no issue with you going out and getting a sharpshooter because you desperately needed to add some outside shooting this offseason and scoring in general. It's a move. It's not the move. I look at all of these on paper and I say, okay, cool. It's a shoulder shrug. These are complementary moves. If they end up being the main moves, this is a disappointing offseason. Like I said, if they go out and make the trade or the free agent signing to acquire that second scorer for Cade, I've even seen LeBron's name thrown out there, which would be crazy to see him in a Pistons uniform, presumably for his last season. If you make that move, I'm looking at all these other dominoes and I'm saying they fell into place. I'm fine with the Stewart deal. I'm fine with you adding Isaiah Joe. I'm fine with you drafting Okorie, but it's incomplete right now. And it scares me a little bit because I'm starting to get a little bit of Scott Harris syndrome, which is they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and they think that they can outsmart anybody, and in turn you end up getting outsmarted by everybody. That kind of scares me a little bit because we saw the aggressive moves that the Heat made. We've seen the aggressive moves that some other teams made, whether it's, going out, teams adding LaMelo Ball. That was the Timberwolves that did that. Like, that draft week is typically a week where teams kind of start to align those chess pieces. I feel like the Pistons might have, I'll make them more chess analogies, they might have moved the pawns, but there was no queen sacrifice here. I don't even know if that's correct. I haven't played chess in a long time, but you get my point. We will assess in the future after the Pistons have made more moves, assuming they make more moves, and God willing they do, because you cannot come out of this offseason without a legitimate number 2 option to complement Cade Cunningham. All right, we will be back. Segment number 3, and we will be talking about, we're going to talk Tigers in segment number 3, and this will be quite something, a season on the brink that has been really since this thing started. It will be another frustrating Tigers segment. Almost, I mean, the season's not over, but the writing is very much on the wall. We'll talk about that in segment number 3. All right, segment number 3, more positivity as we talk about the Tigers, who after a glimmer of hope to begin the season-long 10-game homestand last week where they swept the White Sox, including that pretty incredible comeback on that Sunday game where Matt Vierling walked it off in extra innings. Tigers go 2-5 this week, finishing the homestand at 5-5. They currently have the second worst record in the American League, and whatever glimmer of hope there may have been, I'm not even going to call it a glimmer of hope. It was just like, let's wait and see. Because the truth is, they had a 5-5 homestand with 4 games that they easily could have and probably should have won. And while they wouldn't be in some great place, at least people would still be paying attention at a 9-1 homestand. At least there would still be a little bit of hope. That is all gone. The writing is on the wall. This team will be sellers. We are now, in terms of games played, officially over halfway through the season. I know that we're not quite at the All-Star break yet, but they're going to be major sellers. And like, man, I've done so many segments like this, and people are trying to point out exactly what's gone wrong, and so have I. Look, it's when you have a season like this where you have the expectations you have and things just fall apart the way they have, it's a little bit of everything. I have to start off by saying one thing that I think is going to annoy some people, but I think it is a justifiable observation. This has been an insanely unlucky team. I mean, this is a team that a few days ago had a positive run differential despite being over 10 games under 500. right? It's a team that's had to deal with a surplus of injuries, both to the offense and the pitching, right? It has felt like every coin flip moment, every coin flip game has gone the other way. I have to point that out simply because I think the people who believe that this is like 2017 all over again, and this is the beginning of a new rebuild, and we're not going to see the Tigers be competitive again for a long time, I don't believe that. I still believe that there's pieces here. I think they're better than their record. With that said, that's bringing nobody any comfort right now, and I totally understand it. And the truth is, you kind of make your own luck in this game. What is it that causes teams to have, quote, bad luck? It's being bad between the margins. It's giving teams free at-bats. It's not being able to finish games. It's not being able to finish at-bats, and it's not being able to finish innings. And this team, that Sunday game against Houston was the prime example of it. You have an error that leads to 2 runs when it was a 3-0 game that you were cruising through. I mean, it was done, and you gave them life. And it's a back end of the bullpen that we were excited about with Will Vest and Kenley Jansen and Kyle Finnegan, all 3 of whom have had rough years. Finnegan's peripherals are terrible, and I don't trust him in any one-run game. I understand that the ERA is low, the walk rate's ridiculous. He doesn't have enough strikeouts to back it up. This 3-headed monster at the back end of the pen has been wildly disappointing, and with Kenley Jansen, it's a movie that we've seen a million times here. It's just a different name. It's been Joe Nathan, it's been Francisco Rodriguez, it's been Todd Jones, it's been any one of these aging relievers that comes to Detroit and basically has their career end. Kenley Jansen in a Tigers uniform is going to be the baseball equivalent of Shaq in a Celtics uniform. One of those things that they're going to throw out there and say, hey, you remember this guy actually played here? Yeah, it was his last season. I know he's trying to get to 500 saves. Man, right now, I don't even know if this team has 15 wins left in them, let alone 15 save opportunities. I mean, that's how frustrating this thing has been. They've been terrible. And I think, look, bullpens are very fragile, understandably. But when you're talking about a team that leads the league in losses in which they've had a lead in the 7th inning or later, you put it on the players, right? And I'm going to continue to say that. I'm tired of us letting these guys off the hook because a guy might be playing out of position. If you're not making basic plays, it falls on the players, okay? If you're consistently making the same mistakes, it falls on the players. With that said, with what's happened to the bullpen, I think is a little bit more explainable than some of the other, just bad luck results that have happened to this team. Because a few years ago, Detroit had this ridiculous run in the second half of the season when it was Tarek Skubal as their starter and 4 days of pitching chaos. And the craziest thing about that run, one of the craziest things, was the fact that all of these pieces that they called up, Brant Herter, Brennan Hanafy, Brisky, you had Vest who was there on the back end, you had Foley that was there on the back end. I mean, it was all hands on deck. None of them were huge strikeout guys. Detroit was focusing a ton on pitch shape and not so much swing and miss. And for that run, that 1-2 month period, they were the best pitching staff in baseball. Sometimes success is the worst thing that can happen to you because that has been Detroit's primary focus with their bullpen over the last several years is not getting these flamethrowers. It's getting guys who have good pitch shape, who have good extension on their fastballs with the idea of getting outs. That's the primary goal. We don't need high walks. We don't need massive amount of swing and miss. We want guys with good pitch shapes that are going to get outs. And ultimately, what you've realized is that on the back end, when you're going up against teams on high leverage, you need swing and miss. And especially when you're talking about a team that is as terrible defensively as this group is, which they are. They've been awful. I'll take as much swing and miss as I can get because it means the ball's not getting put in play. Nobody can screw anything up. And I think that it's been a perfect storm of circumstances where you've had multiple high leverage relievers who've fallen off and a bullpen philosophy that I don't think was sustainable outside of that miracle run that they had 2 years ago. Now you look towards the future. Look, Skubal will get traded. Beyond that, I just want to circle back around to something that I talked about in one of my post games several days ago because I don't want to make excuses for Scott Harris. I don't. But when Harris arrived, the first thing he said for the first year he was here was, I got to look under the hood. I got to look under the hood and see what I have. And he has been trying, not going to say to his credit, but he has been trying over the last several seasons to take the Al Avila pieces and try to turn them into Scott Harris guys. Those that being Torque and Carey and Green and Parker Meadows or any one of these, Vierling, I would say was a Harris guy, but just any one of these, the core from 7-8 years ago that were drafted. And for a minute there, it was working. and now it's not. And to me, yeah, trading Scooble, sure. Trading whatever, assets you got to unload, whoever, on expiring contracts, fine. I think if you really want to have a shakeup, you make a move to unload one of those guys because there is still some value there with the years of team control that they have. And when I look at this most recent homestand, you know who were the guys that impressed me? It was Dylan Dingler. It was Kevin McGonigal. It was Ben Malgeri, of all people, who I hadn't heard of until this week. It was Hao-Yu Lee. It was Colt Keith having some good at-bats. These are all, if not Scott Harris draft picks, guys who spent the primary part of their development in the Scott Harris era. I think that you have this weird thing where he's been trying to blend two regimes. It's not me saying that Torrey Green and Carey are bad players, but it's almost like when Rich Rod got hired at Michigan, he was trying to run the spread offense with Lloyd Carr's players. It's just sometimes it doesn't work. I actually believe that the philosophy that Scott Harris wants these guys to abide by, this dominate the strike zone on both sides, that's a great idea. And it's working in the case of McGonigal, and it's working in the case of some of the guys that you have down in the minor leagues. I got to think Clark's going to be here, at some point. But it's not working with the players that you inherited. I can't even necessarily put it on them. I just think that you need a shakeup because in August, I believe it'll be 4 calendar years since Scott Harris was hired here. That's more than enough time for you to have purged the entire Avila era out of your system, and yet it still feels like there's too many stragglers. Again, not me defending Harris because the offseason was not particularly productive. They go out and they get more aging relievers. The Finnegan re-signing has been mixed results. They didn't do enough to bolster the offense. I'm not defending them. But the goal is to develop from within. And right now, the homegrown players that are working for you, in my opinion, the real potential stars, it's not the guys you inherited. It's the guys you've developed. And I think that's something to pay attention to come deadline time. It's a team that, while not in need of a full-on reboot, definitely needs to make a serious splash because this has been a monumentally disappointing season. And we'll continue to talk about it the deeper we get. But I think this homestand was kind of the final nail in the coffin in terms of what this team can be. They will be sellers at the deadline. All right. We'll be back in Austin. I appreciate your patience. We are going to bring you on segment number 4 as we talk about more positive news, this time out of Lions camp. It involves Terrion Arnold. We will discuss this when we return. This is Big Play Detroit. All right, segment number 4, Big Play Detroit, and I've been trying to think about how to go about this segment because it's not a part of the job that I particularly like anytime we're dealing with legalities, anytime we're talking about anything involving the law, but we have to discuss it, obviously. I got to say, I want to apologize because I forgot that this was a story. I remember that it broke that there was Terrion Arnold and there was involvement in a potential robbery and or kidnapping. And this was in December. Anybody who knows me knows that that was kind of at a time where some pretty crazy things were going on, in my family's life. I forgot about this story. So when this dropped, I was like, oh boy, what happened now? Not realizing that it was carryover from the story that broke in December. Terrion Arnold, Lions corner, arrested, charged with 8 felony counts. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but he didn't get arrested for jaywalking, guys. This is one of those things where if he is guilty of one of these, his football career may very well be over. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the case itself because I know how brutal the court of public opinion can be. And I've seen cases and I've seen people's lives be derailed because the court of public opinion gets in the way. I have my opinions. People are welcome to have their opinions, but I am a believer that we should allow this process to play out. So here's the only thing I'll say. If Terrion Arnold is guilty of any of this, and he is put away in prison for a long time, he will have a rare distinction. And it is a rare one because we've had some doozies here. I think you'll have to put him at the top of the list of dumbest Detroit athletes of all time. I think that this one, because he was not drafted into a bad situation. This was not Charles Rogers being drafted to go catch passes from Joey Harrington. This was a guy who was drafted by a team that said, hey, this is a Super Bowl caliber roster. You go be the guy to complement Branch and Kirby as safeties, and this guy couldn't do it. From a pure football standpoint, let's push the case to the side. we still didn't know if Terrion Arnold was any good. There was enough on the latter end of last season before he got injured that made us think, okay, maybe this is something, right? Maybe he's got a little bit of juice left. I don't think it was going to be there. I don't think he was very good. And now, regardless of how this case ends, he ain't playing for a long time, and he ain't playing this season. And this was his make or break year. Well, it broke. He's not going to play. And just from a pure depth standpoint, it scares me because this is something that we have discussed well before Arnold ever got arrested, which is the lack of production and the lack of depth at secondary is startling now. Ennis Rakestraw, who was taken out of Missouri in the 24 draft, who's missed his first 2 seasons of football in the NFL because of injury, is a guy you are now relying on to give you consistency next season. He's never played an NFL game, right? And you obviously talk about Branch being out until at least midseason. You talk about Kirby Joseph potentially being in a situation where he might not even play football again. I mean, that's what people are saying right now. He's obviously going to give it a go, but even if he comes back relatively healthy, is he going to be the same? Terrion Arnold being out doesn't necessarily change how I feel about the Lions. It's not like they went out and they lost Jahmyr Gibbs or something, right? This is not one of your star players. I do think the development of Terrion Arnold would have drastically elevated this team's ceiling if you could have found that, not even lockdown, just stable corner. Now we'll never know. And you're left with a positional group that is incredibly thin. And I know you got Derek Moore in the draft, but it's not like you look at this defensive line and say, oh, well, they'll make up for it because it's going to be a dominant pass rush. We don't know. The last few years, I mean, teams have found ways to take Hutchinson out of games because there's no other complement to that pass rush. I think that this is a defense that I look at, and I think that Kelvin Shepard's got his work cut out for him. And that his job just became a heck of a lot more difficult. Even if Arnold wasn't going to turn out to be any good, you had to at least come into this season with the expectation that he was going to be starting game one. He at least had some experience. That's now gone. And it puts the Lions in a very difficult position. And unfortunately, and this is where I feel bad for Holmes and Campbell, it unfortunately puts the organization in a bad light, which is something that I felt like they've done a great job of avoiding in their tenure. And I don't blame Holmes or Campbell for what's happened to Terrion Arnold. It's just that I think the culture here and the news that comes out of that locker room is more often than not, pretty consistent and positive. Well, now it's something. You can't deny that it's something, and you can't deny that it's at least something of a distraction. Campbell's going to be asked about it off and on for the remainder of the season, and I understand it. So, rough week. I don't really have much else to add, Austin. I'm going to toss it over to you because I know that you wanted to add some stuff about the Arnold situation. What do you got?
Yeah, so it was 4 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of armed robbery, and, hopefully he didn't do it, but all indications are that, he did it and he's going to be arrested. Before I get into the football side of everything and what this means for the Lions, I kind of want to cover a couple things that I saw as far as Lions discourse online. First thing, they dropped a couple pictures, his mugshot, and then there was a picture of him in court in this like vest looking thing. And I saw some people saying that that's a vest that you wear if you're on like suicide watch, which is true. But there's a couple other reasons for that as well, which also includes being a high profile, criminal, which of course that Terrion Arnold would fit that. I also saw some people saying things along the lines of, what a tragic situation, and then comparing this to a ton of other NFL players over the years that have been arrested or done really bad things. But didn't wind up in jail or in prison for an extended period of time and wound up playing football like the next year. The list goes on, whether that's Greg Hardy, Ben Roethlisberger, Adrian Peterson, Von Miller. There's a ton of them. But my thing with that is like, yes, it sucks for the Lions, especially when you have those injuries to Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. But like, if Terrion Arnold did this, he needs to be arrested. He needs to be behind bars, So terrible luck. And you can be mad at the NFL for having, inconsistent standards. But like, it's not tragic for Terrion Arnold. It's tragic for the victims of this if Terrion Arnold did this, and he had it made. He had made it to the NFL. He's a millionaire. The Lions really thought he could be CB1 here, and I did too.
Yep.
He was a phenomenal cornerback in college. People use the word sticky to describe him, and I think we kind of saw that carry over into his pro seasons because honestly, I think the biggest issue with him was just he was so handsy that he was constantly getting penalized. It wasn't so much like he couldn't be a good, productive corner. It was just, he was constantly getting flags thrown on him. So that's really unfortunate. But for the football side of things, of course, you have an all pro guy and a Pro Bowl guy in Kirby and Brian Branch that are injured. And these are potentially career altering injuries. It looks like Brian Branch will be back probably 5, 6, 7 games into the season, which, if the Lions are able to win some games, by the time they make it to the playoffs, hopefully they do, then, he could be a productive piece, but we don't know what version of Brian Branch we're going to be getting. This is an injury that could, greatly limit what he's capable of doing. And something that a way I've heard Brian Branch described above all else is he is a football player. He's not just a safety. He's not just a corner. He's not just a nickel. This is a guy that, just flies around the field making plays for you. And, if his physical abilities are greatly limited due to this injury, that kind of limits what Kelvin Shepherd can do on defense. As for Kirby, I've seen him post a lot of things online, mostly on like Instagram stories. He seems very confident in himself and like I think he posted something saying like he's going to be comeback player of the year. But some of the comments that Dan Campbell has made seems quite discouraging. We have no idea when he's going to be back, if it's going to be beginning of the season, end of the season. But they do not seem confident that what they're getting out of Kirby Joseph is the same Kirby Joseph that we had seen. And I think Kirby kind of echoed that as well, because he had one more recent Instagram post that was something like, I just want to be on a winning team, which is, that's great. I love that he loves it here and that he wants to stay here and just contribute however he can, if that's what that means. But this is a guy that led the league in interceptions. He's an absolute ball hawk, and turnovers, can have such a great impact on the game. So it's just devastating. But, you look at the rest of the secondary. Terrion's gone, Kirby, Brian's gone. You no longer have Carlton Davis or Amik Robertson, some of these other guys. You have DJ Reed is probably your best secondary guy, which didn't have the greatest season last year, but the year coming off of the year in which the Lions signed him, he did have a pretty good season. So, if he stays healthy, this is a guy that can be productive. But, if he's the only guy in the secondary that's really doing anything for you, that's quite alarming. The two other potentially interesting pieces are Ennis Rakestraw, who was the second round pick after Terrion Arnold. We still have no idea what he can do. And of course, we've seen in the past, Brad Holmes has been able to find picks later in the draft, not just the first round, that wind up being very impactful for the Lions. So if there was ever a time or ever a guy to really step up and do something, this would be the guy and this would be the time, because the Lions greatly need it. And then they also drafted Keith Abney out of Arizona State this past draft. I can't remember if it was like the 3rd round or the 5th round. A lot of people really like him, but, in those later rounds, as great as Brad Holmes has been, you never really know. So, he's going to get a chance to prove himself, especially where things are now. But we'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, we've seen what the Lions can do even when their defense is decimated. They went 15-2 the year that Hutch got hurt and was out for the season. And pretty much that entire defense was just gone. Alex Anzalone was out for a prolonged period of time. You had to have guys like Amik Robertson step up, and he absolutely did in games where we needed him. But then what happens is you get to the playoffs, your very first game is at home, and all you have to do is win that game, and you're hosting at Ford Field for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and they got the doors blown off them in that game. So like it looks like the offense can carry them a good, quite a good distance, but, you need a complete team to really be able to make it the entire distance and wind up winning that first Super Bowl in franchise history. And, I think in the past, Brad Holmes thought like, he was kind of going galaxy brain on everyone, able to kind of think that, we have the guys that we need. It's next man up mentality. But this past season proved that, like, Jared Goff didn't really have an offensive line. He was not playing as well as he could have if he did. The running backs, for as great as Jahmyr Gibbs is and David Montgomery, they weren't performing as well on the ground, which, made it so that they weren't able to open up the pass game for Jared Goff. So, Brad Holmes was able to fix that in this offseason. He made some signings. He made some draft picks that I really like, and I think they're going to get back to that. But it is very clear that the secondary has been absolutely decimated for a variety of reasons. And I hope that Brad Holmes is humble enough and recognizes this and is able to get ahead of everything and not just, think that they can do this all from the guys that they have internally. I really think he's got to go out there, make a trade, sign somebody, even if it's, it doesn't have to be a super splashy trade or free agent signing, but they need to strengthen this secondary now.
Yeah, and the last point that I just want to piggyback off of that you made, because I talk so much about depth, but if this current roster stays where it is, I could see you, putting things together somewhat, or at least being stable. But as you pointed out, there has not been a team, especially a defense, that has suffered more injuries over the last few years than the Detroit Lions. And you already have a unit that is very thin as it is. It's probably not optimistic to look at it this way, but it's just the truth. There's probably going to be more injuries beyond this. And they're kind of injuries that you couldn't afford to have. And at a certain point, you're going to be probably relying on some guys that you did not expect to rely on. So we'll see the way this unfolds. It's actually going to be an area where, like, the preseason is going to be somewhat important, just because it would be great if somebody kind of came out and emerged and we went into this season thinking, okay, this could actually be this unit could be a little bit better than what we expected. All right, we'll be back. Segment number 5. We got 2 more here. Austin's going to do I'll Say This, and then we'll have our gambling segment. But we will return. It will be Austin's turn to run point here. Segment number 5. Be right back. This is Big Play Detroit. All right, Big Play Detroit, segment number 5. I've done plenty of talking. Austin, it is your turn. What do you got this week? It is time for our I'll Say This segment. Lay it on me.
I'll say this. Tom Izzo will win his second national championship in 2027. Now, I really hate making predictions about college basketball and who's going to win the national championship. I mean, college sports has over 360 teams in general. It's probably in D1 alone. I have no idea where it's at this point, probably way more than that. The NCAA tournament is at 68 teams, and they're looking to expand, which is insane to me. But what I will say is I'm kind of feeling the moment here. Maybe this is me just kind of like looking at what the story could be. And I just kind of feel like things are aligning really well for Michigan State. Of course, you have a couple of guys that returned that are really key players. Cohen Carr, who's the best dunker in the nation, would be great if he's able to develop a jump shot, but still insanely athletic. You also have Jeremy Fears returning, who is, if he stays healthy these next 2 seasons, is not only going to break, but destroy the all-time assists record. And I've seen a lot of college basketball analysts say things that, like, Jeremy Fears is the best college basketball player that's returning from last season, which actually kind of surprises me because, like, for as much as I like him, and I think he has a very high IQ, and like I said, I think he's phenomenal at passing the ball. The one thing that I do worry about with this team is how are they going to be with their shooting? Is this going to be a good shooting team? And that's been really the Achilles heel for most of the Michigan State teams that, were really good, like top 10 teams, able to make it to like the Elite Eight or whatever. But the reasons that they haven't been able to make it the distance is because they just didn't have that shooting. So hopefully, him or Cohen Carr can take that next step. But there's a lot of other things going on here as well. Tom Izzo was able to bring in one of the best recruiting classes in the country. I've seen it ranked first. I've seen it ranked third, fourth. I've seen it ranked eighth. But this recruiting class is very big, and they are very athletic. And overall, this team is just going to be very deep in general. Tom Izzo was also able to bring in a 7'3", I believe, transfer. And that goes in tandem with another 7-footer, Ethan Taylor, that he recruited that's going to be in here this next season. And I think he's taking a page out of both Dusty May and Painter's playbook here with the 7-footers. I know 7-footers don't just grow on trees, but it's certainly nice when you have them. Purdue has been a powerhouse for so long. See what Michigan did just this past year. And so for as much as I love guys like Kohler and Carson Cooper, and Michigan State has had so many good bigs, having that height advantage is definitely going to play a significant factor. But on top of that, there are some external things that have happened that I think kind of leave the door open for Michigan State, as well as maybe motivating Tom Izzo. Of course, you have Dusty May is no longer at Michigan, so the Big Ten is a little bit more wide open this year. Of course, Big Ten has expanded. They're at 18 teams or however many teams. And Michigan still has some very good players. It seems like a lot of them who were there last year want to stay at Michigan. But Dusty May is a phenomenal coach. He can't really replace that, as well as the 3 great players that they had drafted this season. And again, Tom Izzo is always right in the thick of things with the Big Ten. But not only that, you have the situation with the Board of Trustees. Tom Izzo was extremely pissed about that, and he's making an open call to the culture that he's established over these past 3 decades. And I have no idea what he's going to do, behind the scenes, or what might break in the news or whatever. But it seems like he's fed up with it and wants something to change, because he really liked J-Bat, as well as the president that wound up going to Clemson beforehand. And so that's another motivation there. And unfortunately, of course, Tom Izzo's mother, Dorothy, known for carving up Michigan State's defense, of course, unfortunately passed away just recently. And so I think just this culmination of things, like guys coming back, having a deep athletic team, pieces like 7-footers that he doesn't usually have, a more open Big Ten, and just some additional motivation. The Final Four is going to be in Detroit. National championship game is going to be in Detroit. And the last time Tom Izzo made it to the national championship, they were playing in Detroit. And one thing I've said to you time and time again is man, just imagine if what college football is doing right now. Imagine if in college basketball, the NCAA tournament was played at the teams home courts or whatever. The higher seed got home court advantage. And Breslin Center is an environment that's just unmatched. And I really think that Michigan State would have even greater accolades and accomplishments than they already do if they were able to play in March at the Breslin Center. But, this is the closest thing you're going to get. So a lot of things, a lot of really interesting things to pay attention to. And again, I don't want to say for sure this is going to happen, because it's just, a crazy bet always in March Madness. But I'm going to be keeping a closer eye on the season for sure.
We're running long right now, so I'm not going to add many more thoughts on it. You may. Here's what I will say. From a human interest standpoint and storyline standpoint alone, as you mentioned, there will be a lot of people that will be rooting for this in the same way that they were rooting for it in 2009 when they made it to the national championship and lost to a North Carolina team that was stacked. So we'll be back. One more segment to go. It is our gambling segment, sponsored by our friends at FanDuel. I have a pretty good MVP future for you. I know I had one last week with Dylan Dingler, but this one I think legitimate and from an odds standpoint is incredibly valuable. We'll talk about that when we return. FanDuel, the tournament is here. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. Here's how it works. Place a tournament bet using the token, and if it doesn't win, you'll get up to $300 back in bonus bets every single day for 10 straight days. That's 10 chances to play all tournament long, from game props and money lines to spreads, totals, futures, and more. You can mix things up with same game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to fill your bracket, FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the action day after day. So visit FanDuel.com/BigPlay to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com/BigPlay to get in on the action. 21 plus select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus DC in Kentucky and Wyoming. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable and expire after 7 days. Tokens are received in increments of 1 per day. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat for Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org for Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY for New York, or call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right, Big Play Detroit, final segment, FanDuel time, gambling segment. And I want to talk about a guy who is not a Detroit athlete, but he's somebody that I've been posting a little bit about lately. And it is, I think, has put himself firmly in the MVP discussion, because I would say with the exception of the American League race last year, and even then that was just down to 2 guys. Generally speaking, when you look at the MVP races over the last few seasons, both in the American and National League, one guy has pretty firmly established himself above everybody else. Judge has done it 3 times. Ohtani's done it 4 times. You had the year where Acuna just went nuts and comfortably won National League MVP. That was in 23 with the Braves. This year, Ohtani's still looking great in the NL, but no Aaron Judge. And when you look at the current FanDuel odds, you have Yordan Alvarez, the current favorite, followed by Nick Kurtz, followed by Bobby Witt Jr., followed by Byron Buxton. That is 4 guys who are currently on teams that are below 500. And does it matter as much in baseball? No. I mean, Mike Trout won 3 of these things, usually playing on a team that was pretty subpar. But a guy who has thrown his hat into the ring and is on just a ridiculous tear right now, I think 6 home runs in his last 5 games, and who plays for a team that's legitimately contending, and from a storyline standpoint, is on a team that has never had an MVP to my knowledge. I know they've had a Cy Young winner, I believe. In fact, 2. Junior Caminero for the Tampa Bay Rays has been crazy hot. Rays currently a team that's 15 games above 500. I didn't even realize this guy is 22 years old. So at some point here in the future, the Rays are going to trade this guy and get 3 relievers that throw 100 and just repeat the process until the end of time. But they keep winning 90 games a year, and it looks like they're on pace to do that again this season. And I really think this is one of those years where there is no established front runner, and there's sure as hell no established front runner that's playing on a legitimate contender. And this is human nature. This is just how baseball works. The deeper you get into a season, the more eyeballs there are going to be on teams that are playing for something. It's just how it works. And I understand that there's been seasons where Trout's won this thing, and you look at the numbers and he put up a 10 WAR and he was just too good to turn down. I don't think there's anybody having that kind of MVP season. I think every one of these guys, whether it's Alvarez or Kurtz, those guys are mashers, right? But are they analytically going to be darlings that have 8 WAR seasons? Not necessarily. Amazing players, for the record. Bobby Witt Jr. kind of has that ceiling, but Royals haven't been very good this year, and he's had a few injuries. Byron Buxton's been brilliant for the Twins, but the Twins stink. And no disrespect, but Buxton he's been an injury waiting to happen his whole career. At plus 3,000, Junior Caminero, who's a third baseman who's played over 80 games, with an OPS well above 900 at this point on a team that's 15 games over 500. I mean, from a value standpoint, I feel like that's a bargain. It wouldn't shock me if by the middle of this week, those odds have drastically changed just because he's probably been the hottest offensive player in baseball for the last week or so, playing for a team that's actually contending. And there was a minute there where the Rays were struggling. They found their way kind of out of that little slump they went through, and a big reason for it is that this young player who would be a superstar in any other market has emerged as potential MVP frontrunner. So definitely something to keep your eye out on. I know I talked about it with Dingler last week, but I also did mention with Dingler, a lot of things need to go right, and he needs to continue to play this way. And the Tigers have to kind of play their way back into contention. Cam Monero does not have to worry about that. This is a Rays team that's been very stable here in 2026, and he's been one of the primary reasons for that. Plus 3,000 on FanDuel. All right, that will do it for today's show. One of the longer shows we've done, but we had plenty of stuff to talk about. Never a dull moment in Detroit sports. Let me just plug a few things here. Follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. While you're at it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you are watching Big Play Detroit's YouTube channel. Chris Castle95 on Instagram, at Chris Castellani on TikTok. And one thing that I started doing this week that's probably a long time coming, but Cameo, those personalized videos, we actually had a really good first week with that. Birthday requests, anniversaries, what have you. You want me to talk about Tigers with you? You want me to sing for you? Sure, I can. I've done it, and I appreciate the people who've submitted requests so far. I've actually had a lot of fun filling it out. It's basically like the Tiger videos. I sit right here with the blazer on and just kind of have some fun. So you can check me out there. That's at Castellani2014. That's the same as my Twitter handle. And yeah, thanks for the continued support. Austin, let's get your plugs in. Let's get out of here.
You can follow me on X at Austin Cisler. You can follow me on Instagram at Austin Cisler _20. And if you're interested in promoting something on our show, feel free to reach out to either Chris or myself.
Yep. Austin, appreciate it as always. People at Big Play, appreciate it as always. And our audience, you guys mean the world to us. We'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.